And he turned against, he said, hey, we can't win this war if we keep fighting like this. And they asked him, they asked Howard Tucker in that interview, that famous interview, he gets asked, are you too emotional about the war in Vietnam? And Hackworth says, one couldn't have spent the number of years I spent in Vietnam without becoming emotionally involved. One couldn't see the number of young studs die or terribly wounded without becoming emotionally involved. I have just seen the American nation spend so much of its wonderful, great young men in this country. I have seen our national wealth being drained away. I see the nation being split asunder and almost being split apart and almost being split asunder because of this war, and I'm wondering to what end it will lead to. End quote. That's a guy that loved his troops.
I can only imagine that burden, with 58,000 dead in the Vietnam War, 58,000 U.S. troops killed. And because even at the tiny fraction of that number, that we've experienced in Afghanistan and Iraq, coming back from Iraq, when we came back from Ramadi, I think one of the hardest things for me, just after having lost Mark, with Ryan was blind, Mikey, we lost Mikey in Delta Platoon, and a good friend of mine, who's hopefully going to be on this podcast with you sometime, Elliot, who was severely wounded, and he was in Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, which is the primary burn care facility for all of the U.S. military. And so I went and spent a bunch of time with him there. And from December really through much of 2007, back there regularly and trying to just help him and support him and his family wherever we could. And just witnessing those burn victims in there, when IEDs that were causing, the enemy's most valuable weapon, and you're walking into those ICU rooms, and you're seeing young soldiers and Marines with no lips, no noses, no ears, just faces burned off. It was one of the most horrific things I've ever had to experience. And when I would hear people on the news talking about the war and pontificating about the blood and treasure that we'd spent, and they had no inkling of just how deep and personal that was, and again, that's just a fraction in the Iraq War of what Hackworth experienced in Vietnam. I can only imagine, for him and for every other Vietnam veteran out there, what that was like. But there's no way to not make that personal.
Yeah, and you can see the root of that is, it's the same root. Like you said earlier, these things that you uncover over time, if you take care, if you love your troops, that's going to be, that's what it's about. And Hackworth knew that, that, I know that, General Clark knew that. That's the way it is. Goes on here, loyalty. Loyalty to superiors and subordinates is a basic requirement. Criticism of a commander's superiors in front of subordinates lays him open to the same treatment. He should stand up for his men as he expects them to stand up for him. You can almost see Hackworth's life unfold, right? Like you can see that statement in everything that he did. An officer's presence when the conditions are unpleasant and when the going is tough, sharing the situation of the men means a great deal to them. Pick up the brass. The commander should act as a buffer between superiors and subordinates. He should protect his men from harassment that comes from above, but still get the job done. Yeah, I know sometimes I would pull back the curtain for a few minutes and show you what was happening above me in the chain of command on all different fronts. And look, everyone up above me in the chain of command doing their job, but it's pressure, and it's kind of maddening. And sometimes I would be asking you for something, And you'd get pissed off about it. What the hell you need this for? And I'd say, come here for a minute. Why don't you take a look behind this curtain for 15 seconds? You'd look back there, see that sausage getting made, and say, okay, I'm good. I'll get you what you need. I'm out. Thank you.
No, you always did a great job of screening us from that. But I think that was very valuable for me because it gave me a new perspective. They're asking us for this. I'm getting mad about it. And then I realized like how much you're actually screening out, of that harassment. Like, hey, I'm keeping these guys off your back so that you guys can go do what you need to do.
Next, that their needs be anticipated and met. A good soldier has needs, both spiritual and physical, and a commander should do everything possible to anticipate and meet those needs. At the same time, he should provide all the comforts and privileges practicable. This is not meant to imply that he should coddle his men or treat them as babies. Like, how beautiful is this dichotomy? Just when you think, oh, maybe he's a little off track here, maybe I'm a little bit, no. This does not mean to imply that he should coddle his men or treat them like babies. Such things as a hot meal when it is not expected. Unit parties, liberal pass privileges, and good recreational facilities are more to the point. Next thing that the soldier expects from his commander: to be kept informed and told the reason why. The commander should keep his men informed at all times, tell them the reasons behind decisions affecting them. Many jobs seem purposeless unless the facts behind them are known. He should continually take action to offset rumors and speculation by giving his men all the information he can. Yeah, we owe this guy money, dude. We owe this guy money.
You know what, though? You're probably... obviously there's a direct influence, right, through David Hackworth, an about face from General Clark. I think you could go back to the Greek hoplites or the Roman legions and probably find some centurion who's writing the same stuff. They're learning the same stuff. Yeah. It's some different aspect, a different terminology, a little bit different, a vastly different era, millennia apart. But it's human nature, as we just said, hasn't changed, and I bet there would be something very similar.
And just to make sure everyone realizes, we're not just talking about war. We are talking about leadership. We're talking about leadership in business. You need to tell your people what's going on, and they need to understand why they're doing what they're doing. I'm talking about your family. They need to understand what's going on, and they need to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Any situation where you're interacting with other human beings, these rules apply. And they apply to the point, why do we know that they work? Because they've been tested. We tested them, but these guys test them in even crazier conditions, harder conditions, 3 freaking wars.
And that's one of the most common things we're getting at Echelon Front these days is questions about managing the family schedule and how do I work from home with so many people still working from home. It's those are like a good bulk of the questions are about that, and that's directly applicable. Well,
the other thing that's been interesting is when COVID hit, most of the companies that we work with are good companies that want to be awesome. We do get some companies that come to us sometimes against their will, brought to us by the board or whatever, that we are going to fix them, help fix them. Most of the companies we work with are good companies that want to do better. When COVID hit, so these companies aren't companies that are struggling. These are companies that just want to do, better. And so they would implement the principles that we talk about: implement, cover, move, implement simple, prioritize and execute, decentralized command, default aggressive, extreme ownership. So they implement these things, and yes, they're absolutely start doing better. And we watch them and we get feedback from them, and their profits go and they become more efficient and more effective, and they start taking market share. Everything that goes awesome. And it's cool. And everyone goes, hey, yeah, that's great. And we're super excited about it. When COVID hit and all of a sudden there was companies that were in dire situations and were able to utilize the principles to survive, yes, but also start to actually go on the attack and thrive, that was pretty epic. Because it basically was like, did you ever pull a reserve parachute?
Never have.
Yeah. I only did it one time. And all the other times I'd be like, yeah, cool. I'm glad I got a reserve on. The time that I pulled it, I was like, this thing's freaking awesome, bro. Thank you for packing this thing correctly. Case of beer to the rigger, Because Because normally it's just like, it's work, it's on there, it's all good. And that's kind of what companies, hey, we're doing really good. Hey, our profits are up, all these positive things. But all of a sudden when they're faced with real hardships and challenges, they're like, what should we do here? Prioritize and execute. Oh yeah. Okay.
Or die. Or they no longer exist.
Yeah. Exactly. Hey, we've got this going. We got all these people working at home. What should we do? This is decentralized command. Yeah, we've been doing that. Well, yeah, now you need to do it harder. You need to make sure everyone understands what the mission is, what the goal is, what the end state is. You need to communicate with them. They need to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Can you make that happen? Yes, we can. Okay. Execute.
That makes me think there was an educator, remember on EF Online a few weeks ago as they were about to go back to school, in her state or her district. She was an educator. She was talking about how crazy it was and how much uncertainty it was. And you said, we didn't learn this stuff in a Boy Scout troop. We learned this on the battlefield. Yes. It was crazy. It was chaotic. There was a lot at stake. There was a lot of uncertainty about what was going to happen. Like, what you need to do is prioritize and execute. That's where this came from. And
I know it's getting crazy in that 6th grade classroom, and I'm telling you, this is going to work.
And it did. And she came back and gave us a great sit rep about how it was. She was implementing that and moving forward and doing great.
Legit. Next thing that the soldier requires is a well thought out program of training, work, and recreation. The commander should keep a balance between training and recreation. Too much of either becomes a drag on the men. Logical progression of training helps keep the men from becoming confused. This is exactly what we wrote about in Dichotomy Leadership. Train hard, but train smart. You can smoke people. You can crush them to the point where they're not getting any benefit anymore. Next, demands commensurate with capabilities, neither too great nor too small. A commander should not overload his men with unnecessary work. On the other hand, letting men become bored because they are not working enough is just as bad. Neither men as individuals nor units should be expected to accomplish impossible tasks. What is he saying? You got to balance that dichotomy.
It sounds like General Clark had the same experience with his soldiers that we always said, like, a bored team guy is like the most dangerous thing in the universe because they're going to figure something out to go cause trouble or just create mayhem.
Because rock fights. That was when I was a young team guy. If we weren't being told to do something like sitting around waiting for something, there was a rock fight happening. All of a sudden someone just hits you in the leg with a rock from 20 yards and it's a rock fight. Or actually it wasn't rock fights. There was a couple of those, but mostly
you're not talking about like tossing a pebble.
I'm talking about like hucking. No, what it wasn't rock fights. That's when I was a kid. When I was a kid, there was rock fights. And I don't know what you're even thinking when you're having rock fights. But
we had BB gun wars.
Yeah, we had BB gun wars too.
Shoot your buddy in the leg with your
We had
Daisy.
the BB gun wars. If you got shot,
Red Ryder BB gun.
If you got shot, you had to take off one layer of clothing.
By the way, Zero iPro. It was just the dumbest thing ever.
What's that?
I got hit in the face one time. I came home one time with my eye swollen so shut, and my dad was like, "Son, what happened to you?" I got hit with a spear. We were having spear wars.
There you go.
Sharpened sticks throwing them at each other, and it hit me. It missed my eye by like 3 millimeters. My dad was like, "You're an idiot. Don't ever do that again." Anyway, rock fights.
Oh, yeah, not rock fights. Hucking rocks at objects. It'd be like, hey, who can hit that? So I guess it's similar to the pebble, but it'd be like, hey, who can hit that lamp over there? That street light or something. Well, we'll start saying they're hucking rocks at it.
Speaking of board team guys and rock fights, so my first deployment before we worked together in Testing and Bruiser in 2004. So after your first deployment to Iraq, one of our super solid team guys, in our platoon, was throwing rocks through the window of and got in all kinds of trouble because he damaged this, smashed and shattered a window of this like former Saddam palace, and they literally like pulled an award for him. I mean, it was crazy. This palace had a JDAM dropped through the middle of it. It was completely like, for some reason they got all upset that he like shattered the windows.
What's
crazy.
a JDAM?
A giant bomb dropped from the sky. It's a GPS guided bomb.
Gotcha.
Something ammunition.
Joint direct attack munition, I believe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
We'll go with it.
I don't know. We'll have to ask Good Deal Dave.
Where's Dave when you need him?
We need Good Deal Dave. You know what? There weren't too many times in Tasking and Bruiser where we had board team guys because you always had us busy doing stuff. But the one time that we did let it go, Andrew Paul got volunteered to demonstrate the new tasers that we got.
Yeah, I remember that.
And Chris Kyle tased him, and